sanctuary for the message that God has given us today. What do you do when you're faced with critical decisions? We'll be looking at that message. The topic is Abraham and Lot's separation. That will be our topic today as you join us here in the sanctuary. And I believe you are going to glean something out of it, especially if you are in a place where you are about to make a decision, a critical decision, but you don't know which way or how to proceed with it. We'll be looking primarily about the story of Abram before he became known as Abraham, and the issue that he was facing and the critical decisions that he was supposed to make. The context is Genesis chapter 13, 1 through 18, where we'll be looking at the story behind what really transpired between him and his nephew. His husband were at odds with those of his nephew, and this is where it all comes to making a decision, even if it is from within or close quarters, people who are related to you, and you are in good fellowship, or you are not in enmity, but you have to make decisions. So we will see how Abram was used by God and was changed and transformed from inside out, because he made a very generous offer to resolve the conflict that was now almost full-blown. God had blessed them, and because of their blessing, they were having an issue with feeding their animals. So that is what we're going to be looking at, and we'll see how he allowed Lot to be the first person to choose what he wants for himself. So there are many things we can glean from this passage of Scripture. It can go in different directions, which are very separate, but we will be looking primarily on how to trust God, the lesson to trust God when faced with critical decisions to make in life, because one way or another, we will be and we will have some decisions to make in this life. So the context of the separation, like we have said, it is a story about Abraham and Lot's journey together. Remember, we will look at Genesis 12 and verse 1 and verse 3. If you can cue that, that is fine. Where they began a journey from the Ur of Chaldeans, a city in ancient Mesopotamia. We know while there, Abram would be exposed to polytheistic practices, worship of many gods, pantheons. And this worship of many gods and multiple gods would influence you in the way you think, the way you do things, who you worship, and all that kind of stuff. So we will look at that and see how this is coming about. So Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 13. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." Verse 2, "I will make you a great nation." That's a promise. "I will bless you." Number 2, "and make your name great." That's number 3. "And you shall be a blessing." That's number 4. Verse 3, "I will bless those who bless you." Number 5, "and I will curse those who curse you." Number 6, "and in all the families of the earth you shall be blessed." So those are 7 key separate things that you can look at, but you're not going to be looking deeply into that. But that is now the calling of Abraham when he was called by God. This was his turning point. Remember, at this juncture, this man had not known Yahweh. He had not known to worship one God. He was used to a pantheon of gods. So this was the practice of the ancient Mesopotamia, just like it was in ancient Greek or even in the ancient Egypt, where we know they were worshiping Ra, the god of sun. We know they were worshiping other gods like Isis, that is the god of what? The god of the motherhood. So there were all these gods that they were worshiping. Mummifications, there was a god for that. The ancient Greek, we know they had all these other gods like Zeus, So in Mesopotamia, they were also having these gods that they were worshiping. Chief among them in the hierarchical of the pantheons, there was one called Nanan, the god of moon. He was the superior of all. So it means if there was a hierarchy, then there must have been other gods. So this was their lifestyle. This was their culture. As a matter of fact, this god Nanan, who was the god of sky and stuff like that, they had built a temple, a ziggurat in Ur of Chaldean for Nanan. So he was venerated by the culture and the lifestyle of what they had led. And this is where Abraham is coming from. So he's coming from a background that did not know God. So if you don't know God, or if you remember how you came to the saving knowledge of God, then it does not necessarily mean that you are worshiping other gods primarily. But when you don't know God, then you are in a lifestyle that is different from what the children of light are called into. So this is a turning point in Abraham's life. He's being called from darkness to the marvelous light. He's being called from worshiping many gods to the only one God, the creator of the heavens and earth. So it was new to him. So there must have been a transition. And remember, we have been talking about transitions for a long time now. But then there is a lifestyle that he had to adapt to and to change his ways of thinking. And because of that, then God was going to withdraw a lot of baggage in him. He was a work in progress. So there are many things that he had to be schooled in. And remember, he was told, come out from among your people, and I will take you to a land that I will show you. It's not very easy. Sometimes we just read and think that it was just happening. It is just something that you can do easily because, after all, it is God who has called you. So if you don't have this fellowship, if it was these other gods who were speaking to him, he probably would oblige easily and do what they are asking, because they are the ones who are known among their culture, among their families. But that was not the case. God had seen a need for purifying a people, and that's how the nation of Israel came about, because Abraham was the father of not only the Jews but also the Arabs. You remember the issue of Ishmael and the issue of Isaac. So that is how he came about, because God was wanting to reveal a nature of a people who he wants to bequeath a piece of land. That is the nation of Israel, the way we know it today. So when Abraham and Lot's husband clashed, now I'm going ahead of myself here a little bit. Remember when he was called from the Ur of the Chaldean, he had a path that he had to take. And when he got to a place called Shechem in Israel, at this place he built an altar. Now he's growing in understanding who Yahweh is. He's a monotheistic God kind of lifestyle. It is no longer the gods that he was worshiping. And every time he would see God do something in his life, then he would build an altar to that effect to remind him that at this place, God did this in my life. At this place, God had given me mercies and favor. So that was more like a way that God was introducing himself to him, even as he was shedding off the weight and the baggage of his background. So he is walking, he is going, he's getting to a place. And sometimes when God keeps quiet, we try to help God out, because at this place, after this worship and the praise and the altar that he built at this place, they dwelt there for a while, and he thought that it's probably a good idea to go to the land of Egypt, because there was not enough going around. So oftentimes when God keeps quiet, we make decisions. So, and these are the lessons that we are trying to talk about, the lessons to learn when God is not speaking as often as he speaks, even to you or to me in this very day. So he decides out of his own volition. This is not God now working here, that let us go to Egypt. And when he gets to Egypt, we are told Sarai, who became Sarah, was a beautiful woman. He looked nice. He was beautiful. And he knew that by adventure, when Pharaoh or his men would see who he is and the one they are with, that he knew that his life is in danger. So he was going in a terrible territory, a hostile environment. That much he knew. And though he knew that, he still went ahead and went where he was not supposed to go. So, but he knew our story of what he's going to do. He's going to lie about Sarai, that this is not his wife, so that if Pharaoh would want to kill him, then he would preserve him because of that. We know the story, and that's where we are going to pick up from chapter 13, verse 1, and see how from here now Abram is coming back. He's coming back to Shechem. He's gone through all these mistakes that he has done. We remember he was rebuked by Pharaoh because of what he had done, because God appeared to Pharaoh and told him, you cannot touch that woman. She belongs to my servant Abram. So, but what he did, he was wise. He sacrificed. He gave him a lot of wealth. And from there, he added on top of what we had. So we are seeing now Abram coming back to Shechem, coming back to the promised land, more wealthier than what he was when he went in there. Because sometimes even in the mistakes that we do, God always preserves us. God protects us. And in this instant, God made sure that the Pharaoh had to part with something for his own sake, because they had already taken Sarai and she wanted to be one of the wives of Pharaoh, according to Pharaoh's mind. So to atone for that, he had to part away with a lot of animals and a lot of wealth of their time. And this is the story, the backdrop of the story from chapter 13, where we are seeing now Abram is going back from Egypt. And we are going to read at least one or two verses there and see how that is going to help us in our discourse here this morning. So then Abram went up from Egypt. So you see now he's being chased away. Pharaoh has told him, get these things and get out of here. We don't want to see you here because you want to bring a bad omen to us. We are living well here. Get out of here. So Abram went up from Egypt, and he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. Verse 2. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. Remember, we knew he had come from Mesopotamia. We know he had carried a few things from there. That means he was not a poor person at that state. But that not enough. Verse 2 tells us that he was very rich in cattle and in silver and in gold. So these are the additions that he was given by Pharaoh, because now he has been told to go away. Pharaoh is atoning for himself for the things that were about to happen to him. So he has added more wealth to Abram. So when he is going back, he's going back more loaded than he was. And we shall see this is why they had a problem with Lot, because all of a sudden they have all these animals and all these things to take care of, but they don't have enough land. So, and he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. Remember, when he got to Shechem and built an altar there, he went to live in a place between Bethel and Ai, A-I. That's where he went to live before he went to Egypt. So he's coming back, more like coming back home. The next verse. To the place of the altar which he had made there at first. So he's telling us about what the story was about. And there, Abram called on the name of the Lord. The second time. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. So these were not poor people. And even Lot, along the way, God had also increased him, because these are cattle, they are increasing in number. And because he's closer to his uncle, because this is Abram's nephew, even him, the blessings are going down to him as well. But he was not the one who was called, it was Abram. Now, let's continue. Now, the land was not able to support them. This is in part because of what Pharaoh had done to Abram. It was Abram who was added more wealth. And when they came back, we don't hear of this story when they had settled there at the first time, when they were going down to Egypt. They never had this problem. But now that they're coming back, they are more loaded with more stuff, and they're coming to the same place. But verse 6 is telling us, now the land was not able to support them. Remember, this is the same land that had supported them previously. But now it is not able. God is working behind the scenes, and he's doing or allowing things to happen because of what he wants to do next. Because they are both now wealthy. We have just seen from verse 5 that even Lot had increased in wealth, and now the land could not support them, that they might dwell together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together anymore. So there was no way they are going to continue living together. And this is all orchestrated behind the scenes because God wants to separate them. Remember, the message is Abraham and Lot's separation. So God had called Abram, but Abram took Lot with him, or rather Lot enjoyed the ride to go with his uncle. So he calls one, but then you take a baggage. Sometimes we are about to do or supposed to do some things, but we go to get other people to come and help us do what God has told us specifically to do. So that is added baggage, and it may seem to work for some time, but then it comes to a place where there has to be a separation. Why? Because God still wants to do what he has called you for and to do, and he gets the glory. There is no way he's going to share his glory because of the baggage that we bring along. Therefore, in this case, we are seeing for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together anymore. Verse 7. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot or Lot's livestock. And remember, in this land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also dwelling in the same place. So there's no way they could have taken the land of anybody else at this point, yet they were increasing in number. They were increasing in number, and there was strife between these two individuals and their herdsmen. What does that mean? Because the land was too small, they could not feed their cattle the way they were doing before. Remember, they were also increasing in number. They had herdsmen. They had all these things and everyone around them who must be fed, and they did not have enough land to till. Now, in the meantime, God is preparing a scenario for Lot, because after all, we'll see as we continue that Lot now is in a position of what do we need to do here, and there must be an adult in the room. And this is where Abram is coming in, because now he sees the situation. There is strife among them, and Lot doesn't know how to solve the problem, and it is most likely going to get out of hand. But because God is working behind the scenes and he wants to separate them, then there must be something that one of them must agree to the events of how things are going to turn around. And it is in this place that now we are seeing a separation between the two coming in. Let's go to verse 8. So Abraham said to Lot, "Please, let there be no strife between you and me." So Abraham now, or Abram, since it was still Abram at this point, he's providing a solution. "Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren, we are close relatives, we are kinsmen, we are one people. And it is not good for us to begin to differ, to escalate probably to a place where we are going to have some people who are being injured because we are protecting or trying to do what we need to do for our own investment. We want our investment to grow. And in this place, we are seeing that the place that we are in, it is too small for us. And Abram, by wisdom, and remember now, because of his mistakes of going to Egypt, he's coming back now to Bethel. He's coming back and building an altar. He has begun to trust God more because he saw his foolishness of the decisions that he made, that he had to lie. But he saw the faithfulness of God because God has blessed him, and they are coming back more wealthier than they were when they were going down to Egypt, because now God wants, again now, he wants to speak to him. But he cannot speak to him in the condition that he is in. Something has to happen, something has to give, and he needs to hear the voice of God. But by the wisdom of God, he brings a solution. Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your husband and my husband, for we are brethren. Let's go to the next verse. Is not the whole land before you? That is very key. That is a very key question, because he's asking, Lord, is not the whole land before you? Don't we have all this property that we can partake to ourselves? Please separate from me. It was not easy. When I was doing my study in this, it was not easy for Abraham to separate himself from Lot. Remember, they had one, their close relative. Number two, they had walked all this journey together. Number three, now it has come to a place where they were all blessed. There is strife in the camp, and now he wants him to separate from him. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. Verse 10. This is where it makes even more sense. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed, that is, Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. Let us stay there for a minute. Now remember, they had come from Mesopotamia, the ancient Mesopotamia at this point. This is a place where they had built a lot of things. So they had seen structures, they had seen cities, they had seen more, so to speak, a status of a developed country. Now, then they walk all through this wilderness where they are walking on. They come to Shechem, they go to Egypt, and then they go and find Pharaoh, and we know the story of Pharaoh with the pyramids and the development and the river Nile and the vegetation and the crop and everything else going. So this is where things are going to be very different now, because Abraham, remember, he was the one who was called by God. So he was keen on knowing this true God, the only one and true God. But it looks like, from what we are going to see from here, that Lot was still enjoying the ride, but he did not have the reason to want to separate himself completely from his culture. And when he saw the plains of Jordan that were well watered, and he just left Egypt where there is enough vegetation and water there from the river Nile, I'm sure probably this is how I was thinking about it when I was studying this part, that he may have thought, why do we have to go back to Bethel? Why do we have to go back to Shechem? These are places that are remote. These are places that we don't have anything going for them. And now we left Mesopotamia, and now we are here in Egypt, and it more or less looks like this is the life that I am used to. This is my heritage. I come from a lineage of this kind of pantheons. This is Pharaoh was worshiping many gods. They had all this vegetation going. So there was something in him that had not been uprooted yet. And Abraham knew when he was offering him this opportunity, because he said, look, is there not the whole land before you? So in other words, even Abraham himself had seen all these opportunities. But he chose to give Lot the first option, or the opportunity, to choose what he wants in his life. Whether he goes to the left, he goes to the right. And if he goes to the right, Abraham will go to the left. Whichever way, if he goes to the north, he goes to the south. Whatever the case may be, they were to separate. Let's read again. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw the plain of Jordan. this Jordan looked like the Garden of Eden, like the garden of the Lord, that is Eden, like the land of Egypt as you go towards Zoar. So in other words, there were plains, there was vegetation, there was water. Everything was fit to feed his cattle, to feed his animals, everything that they had, to grow their crop. So he gravitated towards what he knew, and what he knew that he would not struggle for, because everything was left or was lying there bare for him to just get into it and continue. So we are seeing a situation of Abraham here being not selfish by himself, but demonstrating selfless giving and trusting in God's provision, because he knew Lot will choose to go to the easy place, that which you can see with your eyes. He was not spiritual enough to discern that it was not the will of God that they may go to this place because of what will come later. But because he was pulled by the things that we see, and that is most likely what we normally do, Lot chose the fertile Jordan Valley near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and this decision ultimately led to his downfall, because we know what happened. And today is not the topic about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, but we know what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, because he was whisked by the angels from there to run away, because God wanted to destroy this piece of land because of the evil that was going there. So let's go to verse 11. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. So he chose the easy side. He chose what he can see, and you cannot blame him. And I'm sure even us, when sometimes we come to making decisions, we look at all options. What works best for you? What looks good for you? Put yourself in Lot's shoe, and you see, if you are there with Abraham at the time and what they were going through and the strife that was building, you could have made the same decision that Lot made, because it was the only option, better option. We always go we eliminate every option that is not feasible or is not good in our life, and we always settle for that option that looks good for everyone else, that which makes sense, that which appeals to something spiritual in your life. That is what we normally gravitate to when you are carnal. And therefore, when it comes to time for decisions, it's not just necessarily what you are seeing. It's not just necessarily the options that make sense to you. This is what Abraham is separating himself from, because then Lot chose for himself the plains of Jordan, and he left towards the east, because that's where this place was. And they separated from each other. So in other words, if he was going to the east and Abraham was supposed to go to the west, of course he would want him to separate from himself first before he leads his herdsmen and everything else towards where God was leading him. Verse 12. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan. So they have now separated. And Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. Now, this is the contrast of these two people. One has gone to Canaan, the other one has gone to the cities and the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abraham trusted God. He trusted God's provision. He trusted God's insights, that it may not have the bells and whistles of this place where he's going. It was rocky. But the one who called him, he now knows better not to go to Egypt, because that is where they thought that everything would come from. And because he has come back where he should not have gone the very first time, if he consulted with God, God could not have allowed him to go there, because if he called him from the Chaldean, the Ur of the Chaldean, and told him, go to a place I will show him, he never factored that you are supposed to go to Egypt for the time being for your provision. That was his decision. Those are the mistakes that we make along the way when God speaks to us, when we want to help God out. When he seems like he is quiet, remain quiet. What do you need to do more? Like Abraham, build an altar, offer a sacrifice, praise and worship, wait on God. That's what we saw last time. Wait on God until he gives you further directions, because in the midst of the decisions we make that are ungodly, that are humanistic, we end up in the wrong places at the right time, and we destroy or cause others to be affected by our decisions. So Abraham continued to build altars and to worship God throughout Canaan. This is where now he has gone to dwell. Now, it is in contrast with Lot's story, because Lot took a different turn, and he became increasingly entangled with the sinful city of Sodom. Why? Because that's where he headed to. And we know the outcome of what happened there, and that is the contrast of these two people and what happened in their life at this place. So God wants to bring a separation. There are some decisions that you are supposed to make. And I know this is not my message only, this is our message, and the message of everyone who is about to make a decision on how to progress, on how to proceed from a situation that you have been contending with, for a situation that you have been trusting God for the way forward. Wait on God until he gives you direction. And most of the time, it may not look the way you may aspire for it to look like. In other words, it may not be as green as the plains of the Jordan Valley, where Lot took as an easy choice. It may be like the promised land, Canaan. For those who have been there, sometimes you wonder what is so great about this place, yet they have done a lot of forestation. So most of it was not a good place. And you have cattle, you have to feed them. You have herdsmen, you have to feed them. You have all these things that you have to do. But what do? Trust in God. The same God who called you, he is also your provider. He is going to provide for you. Remember now, Abraham is still growing in faith. He's still growing in trusting God. He's a work in progress. He's just like you and me. God calls you from obscurity. He calls you from darkness. He calls you to his marvelous light. You are not used to living this way. So there are things that are going to be shaded from you. And as you begin to trust God more and get to know him, then you get to a place where now you begin to make the decisions that God has made for you. In other words, his will begins to become your will. His path begins to become your path. His destiny for you becomes second nature for you, because now you will be walking towards fulfilling your purpose in this life. So for you who are about to make a decision, for you who are about to think about the path you need to take in this next course, in this next season, or in this very year, trust in God. And don't look at your own abilities. Don't look at what you have. Don't look at your educational background. Don't look at your family lineage. Don't look at your progressive rich uncle, just like Lot did. Trust in this God, because he's able to do what he has called you to and for, because he's the one who has called you. He has all the necessary equipment, resources, and the tools that you need to do what he has called you to do. So I feel very strongly this is where many of us are. You are about to very close to make a decision. Something is building up in you, and you'll be confronted with these choices, because we all are confronted with choices in life to make. And once that time comes, we have to prioritize our options. We have to look at everything, the pros and cons. I'm not saying to be ignorant, not to look at things critically. But even as you look at those things critically, know that there is a God factor. There is something more than just what you see with your naked eyes. And what looks good sometimes is not what is meant for you. The grass is not always greener the way you look at it. You don't know what is underneath that greener pasture. You don't know what is simmering below it, because it may be your demise. It may be the place of your destruction. So let's go to verse 13. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Verse 14. We'll go up to 18 as we conclude. We are talking about the separation between Abraham and Lot. And in their example, it will remind us powerfully of the importance of trusting God. Verse 14, and the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him. So you see, God was quiet all this time. And when they had separated and Lot had gone a far ways towards where he was going to, then the Lord speaks. The Lord brings a direction. The Lord gives Abram a way or a reason to believe that what choice he has made was the best choice for him. Look at what he says. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes and look from the place where you are, and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. Verse 15. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. So God now is reaffirming again. Verse 16. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth. Remember the 7 things that God had promised Abraham when he called him? Now God is now bringing in the details. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Verse 17. Arise. That is the only work that he had to do. After all that promise, the only work he had to do is to arise and walk. Walk where? In the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. And verse 18. Then Abraham moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. So you see, this was a lifestyle. Because now he has had the promise, because now he has the assurance that even the animals and the cattle that he has are going to be provided for. God has gone further and told him, all this land and I have given you. All you need to do is to walk it and claim it. That's why it became important that everywhere you step, everywhere your foot steps, you can claim that for your inheritance, because it is scriptural, because that is what Abraham did. Now, it has to be under the instruction or the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. When the Lord tells you to do something, fall through for it. Because it may have looked like it is just a crazy man walking the land, but by his walking, that was his assignment. It was a contributory factor. It is a partnership with God. When God tells you he will do something, there is always a part for you to play, however minute it may be. For Abraham, it was to walk the land. For Abraham, it was to look the east, west, south, and north by his eyes. We remember this story of Moses when he was told to look as far as the eyes could see. That was the example that we see coming up much, much, much more later of what God had promised him about the promised land. So the separation between Abraham and Lot, and we are concluding here now, powerfully reminds us of what? The importance of trusting God. When Abraham grew in faith to begin to trust God in what he has spoken, even when the circumstances around him or surrounding him look different, he began to see the provision of God, the hand of God in his situation. So, and this is the story for us. This is what we can glean and learn from him. Because the choices you are about to make, there will be one of the two choices that you are inclining towards in this dispensation, in this season. You have probably eliminated many of those others, and now you are left with two. One of them will be by sight, because it's something you can see, and the other one will be by the Spirit, because you have to glean in to what the mind of God is about that situation, and don't just go by what you see. It may make sense. What you are seeing is probably what God also wants for you, and he has chosen that for you. But if it is not, then you end up in the contrast we have just seen between Lot and Abraham, because then you end up choosing what is not of God, that will end up in demise. It will end up destroying even what you have right now, as opposed to trusting God for what we have and what he has for each and every one of us. So we face daily choices between what we see and what we cannot see. And we will prioritize earthly possessions and pursuits. Trust me in this. You will always choose what makes sense to you at the outright. But the story now is teaching us and letting us know that there is a difference of opinion for the choices we are about to make. There is one of trusting God's guidance and his abundance in the decisions we're about to make, or we prioritize by the earthly possessions that we can see with our eyes and say this is the way we need to go. So Abraham demonstrated this truth, which requires a selfless giving, because he could have taken the first opportunity. Remember, it was him who was inspired by God to ask Lord, what or which area do you want to go first? So there must be a selfless giving. Don't be afraid to let go even what belongs to you. If by letting go makes God speak to you like Abraham, so be it. Because you may seem in the apparent moment or in the short run as though you are losing, but in real sense you are gaining, because then God has treasures that are hidden in secret places that you are not aware of. And he is leading you to these places. He wants to expose what is there for you. He wants to expose your Canaan to you, but oftentimes we'll choose Sodom and Gomorrah because that is what we can see. So prioritize anything and everything when there is animosity. When there was strife between Lot's herdsmen and Abram's herdsmen, Abram chose the peaceful route. He wanted to separate from his nephew. He knew that if they continue living together, there will be a problem. So prioritize peace over fight. Prioritize peace over contention, over strife. Anything that is rooted or engineered or supported by strife is not going to go anywhere. God is not in it. He will separate himself until you grow up and make the right decision to desire peace and mercy over revenge that we oftentimes are inclined towards. And therefore, finally, trusting in God's provision. You have to trust God in everything you do in this life. Everything that God has for you is not always in the open the way you can make a decision easily. You have to trust God. You have to hone in prayer. Sometimes you even have to fast to just clear your mind, not to move God, but to clear your spirit that you may hear the will of God or discern the will of God when he is quiet. And like Abraham, you don't have to go to Egypt for your provision. If you trust the God who has called you, if you can trust the God who has said, I want you to do A, B, C, D, then it may seem difficult. There may be even finances that are needed, but you don't have that provision right now. That is not a deterrent. You still can trust God, because the same God who made the world from nothing, he can make provision for you even without a bank account. Why? Because he is the creator of all things. He is the uncreated being who created everything that we see today. So what are the takeaways that we can see or take away from here today as we conclude? 1, prioritize peace. Seek harmony over material gain. So anytime the temptation to wants to go the route of gaining, and this is where sometimes we shortchange others, we backstab people because we want to get ahead, that is not God in it. Prioritize peace. Let the other person have their way if that need be. Remember what Jesus told us? If one slaps you on one side, give him the other cheek. Now, he didn't mean that we are sissies, that Christians are not bold, they are not courageous. No. But he was demonstrating a shalom, a peace lifestyle that we are supposed to get into when we are dealing with God. Because if God says fight, then fight. If he says be still, then be still. If he says let go, even if it is a possession that is so dear to you, let go. And then when you let go, God will speak. So trust God's provision. Have faith in God's guidance and abundance. God knows your case. He knows your situation. He knows your excuses. He knows your weaknesses. When he called Abraham from the Ur of the Chaldean, he knew who he was, and he knew the journey he will take. But oftentimes when he wants to grow us up, he will let us make these mistakes that we make along the way that will cause us feel so bad about ourselves. But since he is all-knowing, he is the Alpha and Omega, he knows the beginning from the end. He knew and he saw this mistake, so it is not any different from us. When God calls you, he already knows what you are capable of. He knows your weaknesses. He knows your failures that you have done in the past, which are forgiven. You are doing in the present, and you are working yourself through the salvation of God, and the mistakes you will make in the future. So he knows your weaknesses. But that did not stop him from choosing you to become his son through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. So trust in God's and God's provision, because what he has called you for, he will provide for it. It doesn't matter about your credit. It doesn't matter how your good standing is with your bank, whether you know the manager of that bank where you deposit your money. It doesn't matter. All that doesn't count. And doesn't mean that you be cocky about it, but that doesn't count. That is not how God operates. He can command even rocks to speak or worship or praise him. If he can command rocks to bring water, then he can command even those same rocks to give provision to you. Trust God in everything that he has asked you to trust him for. Be generous. Abraham, example of selfless giving. He asked Lord, choose where you want to go. If you choose left, I will go right. If you choose right, I will go left. Be generous in the discussions or in the decision making that you are about to make, because God does not want you to hoard or to hold things. The things that you may be thinking you are holding to enable you to have a platform to go to the next level could be the very thing that are stopping you from God speaking to you and giving you the right direction. We have just said it. I think in the book of Isaiah chapter 45, there are hidden treasures in dark places, things that you may not know that they are there. Abraham went to live in Canaan. Remember, at this time, this place never looked any good. There was nothing there to show off. But did he hear God? Yes, he had God. Because the same God who called him, he is the same God who can provide for him. So you ask yourself these questions today. What choices are you facing today? What choices are you facing this season? What decisions are you about to make? Are you providing? Are you prioritizing possessions of things or trusting in God? So as you deliberate on the things that you are deliberating with, there is or comes a time where a choice has to be made. And it's not easy. And sometimes it's not spiritual. We don't want to be super spiritual in everything that we do. But there are those definitive moments that you have to trust God. And as you trust him, like Abraham, there is a future for you. There is something he has set up before you. Don't fear. Be bold. Be courageous. Trust in God, because as you trust in him, he will make a way for you. Like we have sung that song here this morning. He is the way maker. He will make a way for you. He can only make that way for you if you trust in him. If you have a way of making that way, go ahead. Let's see how far you're going to go. But if it is of God, and he is the way maker of your life, even in these decisions that you're about to make, God will help you make the right decision. It may not look like in the short run, but ultimately it will be an inheritance. It will be what God has called you to become, and become a blessing even to others like Abraham, because that was one of the 7 things, that you become a blessing even to other people. Why? Because you have chosen the good path to take, the one that is illuminated by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So thank you very much. Make that decision. Be ready for what God is about to do in your life. We are still in that process of transition, and there are decisions to be made. Every time we see Abraham transiting from one place to another, there were decisions to be made. There were transitions to be made, and every transition was different from the previous one. So even now, this decision that you're about to make will elevate you to another place that you have not been before, and you can only trust God in the wisdom and the knowledge of navigating in the course and the path that you have not been before, because he wants to make your name great. He wants to use you to reach even to more people and become a blessing to others. God bless you very much. See you next month. This will be the last Sunday of the month of February, and I know that God is going to be with you even as you cross over to the next month. God bless you.